AB 3121 is the task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. AB 3121 would establish a task force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. The bill would require the task force, consisting of 8 appointed members, to compile and synthesize the prevailing historical record of black slavery and their afterlives in California and across the United States. Further, the bill would require the task force to recommend, among other things, the appropriate mechanism for redress as it pertains to California's role in the enslavement of black people and their afterlives. It also requires them to disseminate that information in an educational format so California can understand its relationship. I'd like to thank the committee staff for providing a very thorough analysis of the bill, and I hope some of you have read it because it gives really good historical information with regards to how long the concept of reparation has been and many of the challenges and the things that have taken place. Between California's statehood in 1850 and the end of slavery in 1865, California was a free state in name only, with municipal and state authorities actively supporting black enslavement in a variety of ways. For example, the California legislature authorized Southern slaveholders to hold persons in bondage so long as they had entered the state with their enslaved property prior to statehood in 1850. California courts rarely provided sanctuary to those who dared to escape the bonds of slavery in California. In 1852, California adopted a harsh Fugitive Slave Act, empowering state and local law enforcement authorities to enforce self-emancipated persons living within the state back into chains of enslavement. The California Supreme Court ordered fugitive slaves, as in the historical case of Archie Lee, returned to their enslavers in direct violation of California's Constitution. Until the end of the U.S. Civil War, California city and county law enforcement authorities enforced a contract labor system, allowing slaveholders to effectively hold persons in bondage by another name. In other words, California state, county, and city authorities actively supported the institution of black slavery both within and beyond California. This history is not part of our state lore or California curricula, but offers concrete examples of California's complicity in racial discrimination. In fact, the discriminatory practices of the past echoes in the everyday lives of today's black Californian. According to Governor Newsom's 2020 State Address, black people make up 8% of California's population. However, 43% of the homeless population in California are black people. According to the 2018 report by the Public Policy Institute of California, African Americans males account for 28% of the state's male prison population, despite the fact that black men make up just 5.6% of the state adult males. A recent study conducted by California Legislative Analyst's Office states that by nearly every state measure, black K-12 students have the lowest performance of any racial ethnic group. Even as we debate the need for this study, COVID-19 has shed a sobering light on the culmination of these persistent disparities. Emerging data confirms that a disproportionate burden of illness and death due to COVID-19 fall on the black community. In sum, the age of enslavement, both in California and across the nation, birthed a legacy of racial harm and inequity that continues to impact the conditions of black life in California. People who suffer injuries and losses through the malicious and culpability negligent conduct of others have a right to redress. AB 2131 would require an in-depth examination of the impacts of slavery and its afterlives in California and provide the framework to develop guidelines on how to begin to address the disparities born of a shameful history. As outlined, this bill does not take a position on the form that reparations will take, but does take a clear position on reparations as necessary to address the persistent effect of slavery and its successors, including Jim Crow, sharecropping, redlining, theft of labor, wealth, and capital, over-incarceration, over-policing, and systemic discrimination. In the past, we have rightly addressed grievous wrongs through reparations: Native Americans for the theft of their lands, Japanese Americans for unjust internment. The Marshall Plan ensured European Jews received reparations for the Holocaust. And even in 2015, $12 million was set aside for 130,000 U.S. victims of Nazi encampment living in New York City. We seem to recognize that justice requires that those who have been treated unjustly need the means to make themselves whole again, to make up for the losses they experienced, to catch them back up with the rest of society. All of that is important except for African Americans. The one attempt at reparations after the Civil War, the promise of 40 acres and a mule, was reversed after Lincoln's death, and former slaves ended up working the land of their former slave owners. While reparations was actually paid to some former slave owners for the loss of their slaves, As mentioned earlier, California was, in fact and in law, complicit in enabling slavery within its boundaries. This pandemic and this proportionate impact on the Black Californians is only the latest reminder that this has never been rectified and that our community continues to experience the hardship of this injustice.